And now, a U.S. official who committed herself to delivering redress efficiently and fairly to the families of those memorialized here today. Please welcome the Attorney General of the United States, Janet Reno.
Thank you very much. I would like to read a letter from the President. Warm greetings to everyone gathered in our nation's capital for the dedication of the National Japanese American Memorial to Patriotism. Nearly 6 decades ago, as this nation fought for freedom throughout the world, more than 120,000 Americans of Japanese ancestry were denied their freedom and forcibly relocated to internment camps simply because of their ethnic heritage. The National Japanese American Memorial to Patriotism is a tribute to the battles that these Americans faced on the home front, battles against prejudice, ignorance, and discrimination. Despite indignities faced at home, thousands of Japanese American soldiers volunteered to risk their lives for the very freedom that too often eluded them. Last June, I was pleased to recognize 22 heroes of Asian descent with our nation's highest military award, the Medal of Honor, a tribute they had clearly earned but had never received. Now, with the completion of this memorial, all Americans will learn of the valor, the patriotism, and the sacrifice of Japanese Americans who helped to preserve for us and for the world the blessings of freedom. The National Park Service has just released a study of the Japanese American internment sites. Today, I am directing the Secretary of the Interior to examine ways to preserve these important sites so that Americans never forget this sad chapter in our history. We are diminished when any American is targeted unfairly because of his or her heritage. This memorial and the internment sites are powerful reminders that stereotyping, discrimination, hatred, and racism have no place in this country. And if we can overcome them, there is no limit to what we can accomplish together as Americans. Best wishes to all for a memorable ceremony, Bill Clinton. It is a great privilege for me to represent the President at the dedication. The lessons of World War II are not simple ones. That is why it is so important that future generations learn about how Japanese American families suffered grave injustice and hardship and still triumphed over such discrimination and hatred. I do not need to tell you that the internment of Japanese American citizens and legal resident aliens was the product of anti-Asian sentiment of some long standing. Your ancestors first came to this country as indentured workers, some to toil in the fields of California and Hawaii. These pioneers persevered and prospered in the face of prejudice and persecution. Amid wartime hysteria, our government, without due process of law, wrongfully incarcerated 120,000 men, women, and children in remote and desolate locations throughout the country. At the same time, 33,000 sons of these families returned injustice with loyalty and with patriotism by fighting and dying for our country in the United States Armed Forces with distinction and courage in the 100th Battalion and the 442nd Regimental Combat Team in a war to save democracy and freedom. Many of these young men demonstrated unprecedented loyalty and courage. Young Sadawa Munemori was among those who volunteered for the Army, leaving his family behind barbed wire fences at Manzanar. At the close of the war, Army Captain Ronald Reagan posthumously presented to Munemori's parents a Congressional Medal of Honor for heroism. Munemori was the only Japanese American to receive this distinction. It is fitting and proper that in 1988, Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 as the President of the United States. This act finally provided an apology and monetary redress. It is no easy task to balance civil liberties with national security, because during difficult times, complex considerations shape our decisions. But there is no excuse in this instance, and no need to balance, for the equation was clear. It will be important for us to remember and to speak out. For the story of the Japanese American community has also involved national redemption. High government officials played an ignoble role in the internment of Japanese Americans. To the credit of the Japanese American community leaders, including Congressman Bob Matsui and now Secretary Norman Mineta, these misdeeds have not gone unchallenged in the historical record. In 1988, all Americans took pride in the fact that our government issued a public apology, acknowledging that the internment was wrong when Congress enacted the Civil Liberties Act. The Department of Justice, over the course of a decade, administered redress payments of over $1.6 billion to more than 82,000 surviving internees and their families. In addition, Bill Land Lee, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, successfully negotiated reparations for Latin American Japanese who were interned in the United States as well. Nothing ever will redress the pain of internment for those who lived through it. But redress has vindicated the faith in this country of those who shed their blood on foreign battlefields while their families at home were held under armed sentries. They did not fight in vain. The lesson of the Japanese American experience is that a community's abiding faith in our national promise was vindicated through peaceful petition and lawful redress. That lesson must not be forgotten. It is, after all, those ideals that bind us together as a people. This site will be as much a civil rights memorial as a war memorial. It will be a reminder to us all about racism, about suffering, about injustice, and about courage. While we have made great social progress in this country, time and again, we see the ugly face of bigotry and hatred and the violence it breeds. In the past few years, we have witnessed senseless murders of Asians by hate mongers in several cities. On the occasion of this dedication, let us remind ourselves, all Americans, about how important it is to speak out against hatred, against bigotry. Let us remind ourselves of what happened when too many Americans stood on the sidelines and let this internment occur. Let us understand that democracy requires the participation of all people, and for those who stand on the sidelines, they risk the erosion of the liberties we all hold dear. This nation is at a moment in its history that will be recorded in the history books for years to come. It is a great nation because we have learned from our past and our experience. We have come together and we unite as one in trying to work through a difficult time, which to others might be really difficult, but for us is a process of democracy that will prevail. It will prevail because we are one America where people from different backgrounds can live and work harmoniously together. And let us use this dedication to renew our commitment to help our nation live closer to its ideals for which so many fought and died for, and for which so many fight so hard today to make sure that we never, ever forget the lesson we learned then.